Hi there, everyone. I'm Danny, and welcome to this episode of All Monsters Go to Space. Just a little note, I'm going to be changing up the format of some of these videos going forward. This is so I can make them a little bit longer, and to do this, I'll be including multiple beings in one video. I hope you'll enjoy the change. Let me know what you think. Now let's get into it. Today, I'm going to be talking about 5 cryptids from Lumberjack folklore, a subgenre that I haven't really covered much before, except maybe for the squonk. So all these folktales originate from various places in North America and are from approximately the 19th century and the early 20th century. Let's jump into the first one, the Teakettler. This small creature hails from Minnesota and Wisconsin. Earlier records don't describe its appearance, as it was never seen by the human eye, a very shy creature indeed. Later reports say, though, that it was small, approximately the size of a corgi dog, with stubby feet and cat-like ears. Also, a few unusual traits to note from those that had seen them. They had a steam-like vapor that came from their nostrils, and they walked backward, by their own choice. It would seem that no one actually knows why they do this. Now, you may be wondering why they are called teakettler or wild teakettle, and it's because of the sound that they make. Stories tell of lumberjacks who would hear the sound of a whistling teakettle, but they couldn't find the kettle itself. The skeptic in me wonders if any animals in these regions can make this noise, like a bird mimicking the sound, or if their call just happens to sound like this. This creature can be found in 3 pieces of literature. The first was Charles E. Brown's Paul Bunyan Natural History from 1935. The description is identical to the one in George Luis Borges and Margarita Guerro's book of Imaginary Beings, under the section of Fauna of the United States, published in 1957. And the last one is McBroom's Zoo by Sid Fleischman, published in 1972. This one is actually a bird and was called the silver-tailed teakettler. The next creature is the Goofang. There is some overlap here with our first cryptid. This being is also from Minnesota and Wisconsin, and also moves backwards, but for a known reason this time. The Goofang could be found in the rivers and lakes of this region, as it was a fish that had very sensitive eyes. It would swim backward to keep the water out of them, and it could only be caught on or around April 1st. The description given was that they were the size of a sunfish, which in North American freshwater variations is from approximately 8 centimeters to 1 meter, or about 3.1 inches to 3.3 feet. It was said that they were similar to the assapensa, a type of sturgeon that was a delicacy in medieval Europe, so much so that only royals could eat it. Again, it was featured in the book Paul Bunyan Natural History, the Book of Imaginary Beings, and then also in Richard W. Barber's The Dictionary of Fantastic Beasts from 1971, which is where it mentions the similarity to medieval legend, and it also features in the 1987 book The Angler's Bedside, Bankside, and Barside Yearbook by Cliff Parker, and it's in this book where it mentions when it could be caught. It has also found its way into more modern pop culture. It showed up in the Scooby-Doo comic, number 134, Velma's Monsters of the World, Fearsome Critters, and also in a children's book from 1968. It was titled The Gilly Goofang, written by George Mendoza and illustrated by Mercer Mayer. The third being of this video is the Wapaloosie, or the plural form Wapaloosim. This one hailed from Idaho, the forests in North Idaho specifically, along the section from St. Joe River to the Pacific coast, but I did also find some reports that it comes from Washington and British Columbia. It was said to be the size of a dachshund hound, with the feet of a woodpecker and a spiked tail. This would aid them in climbing trees, on which they would find their only food source, mushrooms. It also had grey rings on its body, large eyes, and black hair on its heads, a little like a lemur. They were as agile as squirrels, and honestly, I can't imagine how I would feel if I saw a sausage dog-like being with bird feet scampering up a tree. There are a couple of tales surrounding these creatures. The first one I came across was about a hunter who was in the forest and saw one of these creatures. They shot it and made a pair of fur-lined gloves. The hunter wanted to show off his new attire to his friends, but when he picked up his axe, the gloves moved themselves up the handle all the way to the top. The hunter dropped the axe, but no matter what he picked up, his hands would always try to reach the very top. He threw the gloves away, but they could still move on their own, and the last sighting the hunter had of them was as they scampered up a tree. I do not want to come across that. This creature features in a book called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods, 20 Chilling Tales from the Wilderness by Hal Johnson. a good little fiction book for young high school students who might be getting interested in folklore to read. In here, it says that they aren't necessarily a fearsome creature by itself, or even when alive, but they did lead to a massacre all the same. A resident of Washington saw one feasting on some mushrooms. She killed it, and knowing that it couldn't be eaten, she had their hide fashioned into a pair of gloves, much like the hunter. But they couldn't be worn when she wanted to use her rifle. Not for any nefarious reasons, but because they were too thick. So she used the fur she had collected to make scarves, and sold them to the locals of her town. And here is where it gets gruesome. She put on her gloves and picked up a gardening tool where, just like the previous hunter, her hands climbed to the top. She eventually tested them on a tree where they disappeared into the canopy. She thought about the scarves she had sold and wondered if they had done the same. She went through the woods and would eventually find the people of her town dead among the trees. So if you do see a creature like this, it is definitely best to leave them alone, and alive, as nothing good seems to come from their fur. Now on to the next cryptid, the Dungavenhooter, from Maine and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This being is like an odd-looking alligator. It has short legs, a thick, clubbed tail, very large nostrils, and no mouth. But don't let this make you think it's harmless, because it very much is not. It is quite deadly. It can't be heard, so there is no warning sign of it coming for you, unlike the crocodile in Peter Pan. It waits behind the bushes, and when a poor, unsuspecting person walks within its range, it leaps out and uses its tail to pound them into either a very fine powder or a vapor and snorts them up. It usually lives in the marshes, so avoid those areas if you can, and maybe carry a long stick to prod at the bushes and through the area. And finally, the last cryptid for this video is the Rumptifusel, another fearsome creature that should be avoided at all costs. This being is large and resembles a fur coat that has been dropped on the ground or draped over a stump. It is long and flat, and if someone were to try to pick it up, the usually slow creature would quickly attack, and using the thousands of paws on its underside, it would eat its prey, leaving only little balls of fluff behind, something akin to the pellets that owls leave behind after their meals. To say that I'm going to be very wary of any fur coats I may see lying on the ground from now on is definitely an understatement. This creature was featured in Paul Bunyan Natural History book and in Fearsome Creatures by Henry H. Tryon, both from the 1930s. Now I am wondering if any of you have heard of these beings or any of the creatures from Lumberjack folklore. I'm very intrigued by it. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you liked this new format, and be careful if you are walking through certain areas. A coat may be something so much worse. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time and in the comments section. Bye!